If you crave dark romance where desire is slow and deliberate, where intimacy is built through attention instead of touch, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Tonight's story begins in a late-night diner booth, and with a vampire who sat across from me for hours and never looked away. The diner is almost empty when I push through the door. It's the kind of place that only exists after midnight, humming quietly with fluorescent lights and the low murmur of an old radio behind the counter. Vinyl booths line the walls, cracked but clean, smelling faintly of coffee and something fried hours ago. A few truckers linger near the back, heads bowed over plates, their conversations soft and tired. I slide into a booth by the window, shrugging off my jacket. The glass is fogged from the cold outside, blurring the streetlights into soft halos. I order coffee I don't really want just to justify staying. That's when I feel it. Not a touch, not a sound, attention. I look up. He's already sitting across from me. I don't know how long he's been there, and that's the unsettling part. He's white, tall even while seated, pale in a way that feels intentional rather than unhealthy. Dark hair brushed back neatly, posture relaxed but alert, as if stillness is something he's trained himself into. His eyes are fixed on mine, not staring, studying. "You don't mind," he says calmly. It's not phrased like a question. I glance around the diner. Plenty of empty booths. No one watching us. My pulse ticks a little faster. "I think I would have noticed if you sat down," I say. "Yes," he replies. "That's why I waited." "For what?" I ask. "For you to stop looking at the door," he says. "You weren't ready to be interrupted." That makes my breath hitch. "You've been watching me," I say. "Yes." There's no apology in his voice, just honesty. "That's strange," I say. "Yes." I study him more carefully now. He hasn't ordered anything. His hands rest loosely on the table, fingers still, controlled. He doesn't fidget. He doesn't blink as often as he should. "What's your name?" I ask. "Silas," he replies. "No last name." "Of course." "And you?" he asks. I tell him. He repeats it once, quietly, like he's testing the sound. The waitress appears with my coffee, setting it down between us. She glances at him, hesitates. "Can I get you something, hon?" she asks him. "No," Silas says. She waits a beat longer than necessary, then nods and walks away, visibly relieved. "You don't eat?" I ask. "Not like this," he replies. "Then why sit in a diner?" "Because people breathe honestly here," he says. "They stop performing." I wrap my hands around the mug, letting the heat ground me. "And I'm honest?" I ask. He listens for a moment. "Yes," he says. "You are." The way he says it makes my chest tighten. "You're counting," I realize suddenly. "Yes." "What?" I ask. "Your breaths," he answers. "They're uneven." "Because you're unsettling," I say. "Yes," he agrees. "But you're still here." I should leave. I know that. Instead, I take a slow sip of coffee and set the mug down deliberately. "What happens if I ask you to stop watching me?" I ask. "I will," he replies immediately. The certainty surprises me. "And if I ask you to stay?" I ask. He meets my gaze, something dark and careful flickering behind his eyes. "I already am," he says. Silence stretches between us, thick and deliberate. I become aware of how loud the diner feels suddenly. The clink of silverware, the hum of the lights, the scrape of a chair being pushed back somewhere behind me. "You're not human," I say softly. "No," he agrees. "What are you?" I ask. "A vampire," he replies, as calmly as if he's telling me the time. I wait for fear. Doesn't come. "You could feed here," I say. "Yes." "But you're not." "No." "Why?" "Because you didn't come here to be hunted," he says. "You came here to sit with someone." My heart stutters, traitorous. "You can hear that," I say. "Yes." "And you're still here." "Yes." "Is that safe?" I ask. "For you," he says quietly. "Yes." "For me, less so." The diner thins as the night stretches on. One by one, the other patrons leave, coats pulled tight against the cold. The waitress refills my coffee without asking, casting curious glances at Silas but never quite meeting his eyes. The emptiness changes the booth. Not physically, emotionally. With fewer people around, the space between us feels louder, like silence leaning in to listen. The vinyl seat creaks softly when I shift, and I become acutely aware of how much sound a body makes when someone is paying attention to it. Silas notices immediately. "You adjusted," he says quietly. "I crossed my legs," I reply. "Yes," he agrees. "Because you became aware of yourself." "That's unsettling," I say. "It can be," he replies. "Or grounding, depending on who's watching." I meet his gaze. "And which are you?" He doesn't answer right away. He listens instead, head tilting almost imperceptibly. "Careful," he says finally. "With what?" "With you," he answers. The word lands heavier than it should. I take another sip of coffee, slower this time, deliberate. I feel his attention sharpen. Not hungry, not predatory, but focused, as if he's cataloging the choice. "You're very still," I observe. "Yes." "Is that for me?" I ask. "It's for both of us," he replies. "Movement invites impulse. And impulse is bad?" "For someone like me," he says. "Impulse is unfinished thought." The intimacy of that admission settles deep in my chest. I glance around the diner again. Only one trucker remains, half asleep over his plate. The waitress hums quietly behind the counter, pretending not to watch us. "You could leave," I say. "Yes." "But you won't," I add. "No." "Why?" "Because you haven't," he replies. "And because staying is a choice I don't make lightly." I study him more closely now. The pale precision of his skin. The way his eyes never flicker away when mine hold his. The discipline carved into every line of him. "How long have you been a vampire?" I ask. He pauses. "Long enough to forget the number." "And you still sit in diners at midnight," I say. "Yes." "Why?" "Because places like this," he says, "teach restraint. Hunger everywhere. Access everywhere. And still boundaries." That sends a quiet shiver through me. "You're practicing," I murmur. "Yes." "With me," I add. "Yes." The honesty of it feels intimate in a way touch never could. I shift again, this time leaning forward slightly, elbows resting on the table. The space between us narrows. Not by much, but enough. Silas doesn't move, but his attention tightens. "You're testing," he says softly. "Am I?" I ask. "Yes," he replies. "And you're waiting to see if I'll close the distance." "Will you?" I ask. "No." "Why not?" "Because the first person to move loses clarity," he says. "And I don't lose clarity around people I want." My breath stutters despite me. "You want me," I say quietly. "Yes." No hesitation. No embellishment. "And you're still sitting there," I say. "Yes." "That seems unfair," I murmur. He almost smiles. "Restraint usually is." Silence settles again, thick and deliberate. I realize then that he's no longer matching my breathing exactly. He's anchoring it, slower, steadier, encouraging calm. "You're regulating me," I say. "Yes." Without asking. "I would stop if you asked," he replies immediately. "I consider that." "Don't stop," I say. His attention sharpens, something dark flickering behind his eyes, but he doesn't move. "Thank you for choosing carefully," he says. The words feel like praise. Time stretches strangely after that. We talk more openly now about places that feel safe at night, about the strange intimacy of shared silence, about how loneliness doesn't always want company, just recognition. He tells me about listening to cities breathe, about learning to tell fear from desire by the sound alone, about the cost of mistakes made when restraint faltered. "I don't make those mistakes anymore," he says quietly. "Because of discipline," I say. "Yes." "And because of respect," he adds. "For humans," I ask. "For individuals," he corrects. There's a difference. The last trucker finally leaves. The diner feels like it's holding its breath. Silas shifts then, not closer but subtly angled, body positioning himself between me and the door without blocking it. "You did that on purpose," I say. "Yes." "Why?" "Because you're tired," he replies. "And tired people deserve gentleness." The tenderness of that nearly undoes me. I rest my hands flat on the table, grounding myself. He notices, nodding once, approval flickering across his expression. You're good at this, I say. At what? At being dangerous without being cruel, I reply. He considers. That's learned. How? By failing first, he says simply. The diner clock ticks closer to closing time. I don't want this to end, I admit. It won't, he replies. It will change. How? That depends on what you ask next, he says. I hold his gaze, heart steady but unmistakable. What if next time I slide into this booth, I say slowly, I ask you to sit closer? He meets my eyes, dark and unwavering. Then I'll ask you if you're choosing closeness, he says, or chasing sensation. And if I say closeness, I ask, then I'll stay exactly where you need me, he replies. The restraint in his voice is devastating. The waitress clears her throat softly behind us. The waitress approaches again, wiping her hands on her apron. We're closing in about 15, she says gently. I nod. Of course. Silas inclines his head but says nothing. We sit there a little longer, neither of us rushing to move. The booth feels smaller now, the space between us charged and deliberate. I notice how closely his breathing, or the imitation of it, has aligned with mine. Not matching but steadying. You're doing that on purpose, I say. Yes. Why? Because when you calm, he says, so does the night around you. That sounds like responsibility, I say. It is, he replies. I stand slowly, sliding out of the booth. He rises a moment later, movement smooth and unhurried. I can walk you, he says. You're asking. I ask. Yes. I nod. Okay. Outside, the air is sharp and cold, the street quiet under flickering lamps. We walk side by side, not touching, but close enough that I can feel his presence like a steady line beside me. You're listening again, I say. Yes. To what? I ask. To see if you're afraid, he replies. And am I? No, he says. You're open. That sounds dangerous, I say. It can be, he agrees. But only if I forget myself. In my building, we stop. The moment stretches, heavy and deliberate. You could come in, I say softly. Yes. But you won't, I add. No, he agrees. Why? Because tonight was about sitting, he says. Not taking. I nod, understanding settling deep in my chest. Will you be at the diner again? I ask. Yes. When? When you need to be seen without being claimed, he replies. I hesitate, then ask. And if next time I ask you to look away? I will, he says immediately. And if I ask you to move closer? He meets my gaze, dark and steady. Then I'll ask you why. I smile despite myself. That seems fair, I say. He steps back, already retreating into the night. Silas, I call softly. Yes. Thank you for staying seated. A faint smile touches his lips. Thank you, he replies, for choosing to stay. I go inside, heart steady, breath even. And I know without doubt that the next time I slide into that late-night booth, the vampire across from me won't just be watching. He'll already be waiting.